Hi everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's embroidery video, we're doing more of like a behind the scenes type of tutorial. As you might have seen a couple weeks ago, we did a tutorial going over that adorable Trooper notebook holder. Today, we're going to be continuing along those lines, but this time we're gonna make them mini. So these are a smaller size notebook holder. And I am considering making these and offering them up in the OklaRoots Shop. So we have shop.oklaroots.com. I'll have the link for it down below, but that's where we make some handmade goods and sell them just for fun. So what I'm testing out today is how efficient I can make these. I want to make 2 at a time on my multi-needle embroidery machine, my Ricoma EM1010. I'm going to be using my heat press to quickly fuse and press my fabric. We're going to see how easy this is to do and how much time it takes to make these. So I will start a clock once we start working on this just to see, is this a profitable item to have in the shop? So I will have a link for the pattern for these down in the description of this video. I'll also have a link for my previous video where I really walked you through how to make the larger version of this on a single needle embroidery machine. Thank you as always to Tiffany over at Crashing Waves for allowing me to use your patterns in my tutorials. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, anything at all you want to say, leave them down in the comment section down below. I will have timestamps for every step of this down in the description of this video. This is going to be a little bit different than most tutorials as I don't have it completely planned out. We're kind of going to work through this together, figure out how we could most, quickly and efficiently make these so that we could sell them in a shop. So if you're a small business owner who sells handmade goods, this might be interesting to you. Otherwise, this is just a tutorial showing you how to make these 2 at a time. All right, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is mess with this heat press. Now this is not on, it has not been heated up or anything like that, so I can touch it and it's okay. This heat press is from Ricoma and I have an entire unboxing video going over all of the ins and outs of this, how to incorrectly unpack it and get it set up. But I have a little bit more experience with it now. So I just turned it on and I have the heat press heating up to 350 degrees. We'll just take a few minutes. And what I'm gonna do is I'm first going to press my piece of fabric. Now this piece of fabric is the design, the feature fabric on the notebook holder. You don't actually have to have a piece of fabric at all, but I really like using this lawn material. It's very drapey, very lightweight. There's a lot of fun color options. You could use quilt cotton, you could use whatever you want, cotton lycra. I am using the lawn. And so since it is so thin and lightweight, I do need to interface it a little bit. So first I'm going to press this material and then I'm going to fuse this onto it. And I'll just tell you, we did this the other day, and fusing the interfacing to the fabric using a heat press is night and day different than using an iron. I mean, I fuse woven interfacing to fabric all day, every day. That's what I do with my iron, right? It's just constant. We do it for bags all the time. We do it for every project. Using a heat press for this, it's 20 seconds. 10 seconds to flatten this out, 10 seconds to press this on, and you cannot get it off. I'll tell you, we actually fused this onto the wrong side of a piece of fabric and I could not get it off. It was fused so well. Okay, I now have my heat press heated up, so I'm just going to pull this little tray out so I can safely put my fabric down on here. And then I'm just gonna push it in and pull it down. And now it's gonna lock for 10 seconds. 3. And then it unlocks. Here we go, got this nice and pressed. So now I'm going to take this and lay it right side down and pull this out. I'm going to lay it right side down like that. I'm going to grab my woven interfacing and lay it glue side down on the back. And you can, I have these Teflon sheets. A lot of you guys recommended I get these Teflon sheets. I have these if I need them. I don't think I need it for this right here, but you could definitely put those down underneath and above this. So I'm just going to slide it back in and press it back down. All right. And yeah, this is fused so incredibly well. And I know this isn't a huge piece of fabric, but it would still take me longer than 20 seconds to press this and fuse this. Maybe it wouldn't take you that long, but it would take me longer than 20 seconds. So now we can go get started on actually making the notebook holders. So here are the fabrics we'll be using in the tutorial today. First, I have the vinyl. This vinyl is going to be for the front of our notebook, so it's going to be behind the fabric, but it's also going to be used for the pockets. And then I have my fabric, which is my feature fabric. I have a bigger piece than necessary, obviously, because I'm going to be cutting this down. And then I have felt. Felt is for the backing. Now, I really prefer this felt right here. It has a crispness to it. It's a little bit thinner than the craft felt you would get at most craft stores. I find that this works really well with these notebook holders. The measurements for each of these cuts is listed in the pattern. So for embroidering today, I will be using the cutaway stabilizer again. I will tell you, I did make one with tearaway stabilizer, and with how big my hoop is and how much stuff I put on it, I found it didn't work great. It could have been the type of tearaway I was using, but I do prefer the cutaway for this project. I think it works fantastic. The hoop I'm using today is a Mighty hoop. It's 8 inches by 13 inches. It is a tight fit getting 2 notebook holders in here just because of how wide they are, but it does work. But it's a little nerve-wracking with how close it gets to the side, so we'll work through that today. Here's a bunch of the other stuff we'll be using today. I always have masking tape to hold everything in place. I also have this 3M transport tape. This is very, very sticky tape, but it's really good at holding smaller pieces in place. Fabric scissors, embroidery scissors that are curved for the applique design. Tweezers and snips, these are really good at working together to really get in there and clean up any rough edges. My 1 inch by 6 inch ruler, and then 505 spray to adhere the felt to the back of the hoop. You could also use tape, but I do prefer using this. Thought I would also show you, this is the ribbon that I like to use. It's elastic. This is actually a double fold elastic. It's 3/8 of an inch wide. I do prefer the velvet, but I accidentally ordered 100 yards of the double fold, so that's what I'll be using in a lot of these notebooks. The pattern calls for 1 inch wide, but I think with how small these are, I really like the 3/8 inch size. So you can see this one has a velvet elastic on it, which just gives it a really nice professional feel. But you can see how small this is. I think that 3/8 of an inch size works really well with this dainty design. But I will have a link for where I get all these if you want to go get yourself all the colors. This is just a scrap pack you can pick up. All right, so here are all of my cuts for my notebook holders. Like I said, I'm doing 2 at a time, so I've got double the cuts. We have the cut for the main front panel. We have cuts for the pockets. You can see I have this longer strip. I'll show you what I'm gonna do with this longer strip, but there's 2 pockets for each one of these. And then we have the main fabric that we're gonna use over the center of our vinyl. Again, you don't have to add fabric. You can just skip it and then have a cute, satin stitch or zigzag stitch going around your vinyl if you really just wanna show off your vinyl. I've seen a lot of people do that and it's very, very popular. And then I have 2 scrap pieces of vinyl. Those are gonna cover the ends of the elastic in a nice little decorative way. My elastic, I have 2 cuts of elastic to hold the notebook closed, and then I have 2 additional cuts to make little pen holders on the side. Each of these is 2 inches long. And then I did not cut down my felt because I'm just going to spray my felt to the back of the entire hoop. Both of these will have the exact same felt, so I don't need to cut this down. All right, so let's cut down our cutaway and get it hooped. And if you are using the same piece of vinyl for all of this, you can definitely just hoop your vinyl and not use cutaway at all. If you do that, just skip the first step because the first step is going to trace out where you're going to put your vinyl. And you don't need that trace out step on your vinyl. So I would just skip the first step and then just continue on with the pattern as normal if you just hooped your vinyl. But one of the nice things about this is that if you want to make this a scrappy project, you just hoop your tearaway or your cutaway and then throw your vinyl on top of it. And that's just cool. All right, now we can take this to the embroidery machine, get our design loaded, and we're gonna trace out all this. I'm gonna show you it's very close to the edge. I get very nervous when we sew very close to the edge. But with my machine, this is as wide of a hoop as I can get. This 8 inch, that's as wide as I can go, so I gotta work with it. So as you can see, I have my design all loaded. I have 2 of the notebooks loaded on here. I edited that in my digitizing software. Depending on what type of machine you have, you can either do that at your machine or you can use some sort of software in your computer. I just used my computer and duplicated the design so that I can do 2 at once. So what I'm going to do now is lock it, and then I'm going to trace out my design and adjust my hoop just to make sure I don't hit the edge of my hoop when I'm going on the edges over here. Okay, I mean, it gets really close to the top and the bottom of my hoop, but I don't think it's gonna hit it. I guess we're gonna find out. So for this first step, we're just going to stitch out placement for our vinyl. Okay, now I'm going to take this out of the machine just to show you the next step a little bit more easy, but you could definitely leave this in the machine for this step. Okay, so now what you want to do is lay out your vinyl on top of the traced out area. So you want to make sure it completely covers it. And since it gets so close, I think I might actually have to trim my vinyl down just a little bit. I don't know. We should be okay. We should be okay. We just don't want this moving around. So now we're going to take this back to the machine, and the next step is going to trace out the inner rectangle for our feature fabric. Alrighty, now I'm going to grab my fabric and my tape, and I'm going to place my fabric so that it goes over that stitched out area really well. And I am going to tape this down. Now you could just kind of hold this down at the machine with your hand, but I find taping this step down keeps everything nice and flat. And what I'm trying to do right now is just prevent my fabric from kind of bubbling up on me. So my stitches will go over my tape, that's fine. I'll just pull them out because we're going to cut all this down anyways. All right, let's take this back to the machine, and now we're going to tack down this fabric. All right, once you have that tacked down, go ahead and remove your tape and pull it out of all your stitches. As long as you're using masking tape, this shouldn't be that big of a deal. I'll have a link for the masking tape that I use. I've used a lot of different tape, and this is definitely the easiest to get out of stitches and to clean up. All right, once we have it all cleaned up, we're going to just trim the fabric off around the edges. So you're going to cut as close to the stitching as you can get it, because we're going to satin stitch around this, but if you leave little bits that are kind of chunky, it's not going to get eaten up in the satin stitching, and it's going to look a little rough. So just take your time here and clip around all these edges. And what I do is I just go around once in one direction, and then when I clean it up, I'll cut it in the opposite direction. And that usually helps really trim down as close as I can get to the stitches. So I don't know if you can see, but I have like a really big bit here that's hard for me to cut from one direction, but if I go the other direction, I can get nice and close to those stitches. All right, we can take this back to the embroidery machine, and it's going to do a satin stitch around this entire piece of fabric. Now that it's done satin stitching, we're going to run the next step, which is going to provide placement for our elastic. So now I took this out of the machine to kind of show you better how we do this. I like to grab my pieces of elastic and my 3M tape. And what we're going to do is we have like a little zigzag stitch here. We're going to line up our elastic in between the two shorter lines. So if you're using a 1-inch wide strip of elastic, it's just going to notch in there perfect. I have it overhang that center line so that it meets up with the diagonal line going between my two vertical lines. And I'm going to grab a piece of my 3M tape to just hold all of this down. So once I have one lined up, I'm going to straighten out my elastic and then wrap it around so that the opposite edge will come up from the other side, and they'll just meet up with one another right there in the center. And then I'm going to use a piece of tape to tape both ends down, just like that. Now, when we go to the machine, it's going to stitch down on one side, and then it's going to stitch down on the other side. So if you wanted to, you could attach each of these one at a time. I like to just tape it all down at once. And grab another piece of tape. You want to make sure you keep this loop part out of the way. You don't want this to accidentally get in there and then it's all messed up and you got to cut it out and ask me how I know. So I'm gonna tape my second elastic down just like I did with the first one. So they're looping around, meeting together right in between those little notches. And then I have them just kiss each other at that diagonal line. And then I put my really sticky tape over it. There we go. So now we're gonna go back to the sewing machine and it's going to do one line over each end of our elastic to hold it in place. Okay, so this next step is going to stitch out the placement for our little piece of vinyl that's going to cover the ends of our elastic. You want to be really careful here and make sure your elastic doesn't get twisted around and bunched up. So if you have to slow your machine down, slow it down. You might want to tape the elastic out of the way or hold it out of the way carefully while you do this step. Okay, now just grab your small pieces of vinyl and just place them over that traced out step, and this is going to tack down your vinyl. All right, there we go. Now we have this stitched down. Let's cut around this stitching. Now, Tiffany, the designer of this pattern, recently adjusted this. Previously, this was the last step for stitching down this little tab right here. However, she updated the pattern to include a satin stitch to go around this edge, which I really appreciate because I am kind of a sloppy cutter, so I really need that satin stitch to make my work look its best. So I'm cutting nice and close to the stitching. If you're using the file that does not have you use a satin stitch around here, you don't want to cut right up against the stitches, but just close to it. But you can see this normally would be how we would leave it, which still looks beautiful. I mean, it really looks nice, but the satin stitch around it just helps hide those raw edges. Okay, before we go back to the machine, I am going to tape down my elastic because when the machine is doing a satin stitch, it kind of jiggles the whole thing back and forth a lot. And I don't want to accidentally kind of not see that my elastic got sucked into the satin stitching. So I'm just going to tape down the edges just like this. I just need to make sure it stays away from this edge over here. Okay, let's take this back to the machine and satin stitch around our little vinyl accent right here. Alright, great. Now that that's done, remove the tape if you added any to hold your elastic. And we're going to hold the elastic in a different spot now. So now we want to keep the elastic far away from all the edges. So I'm just going to take my elastic and just kind of fold it over itself, right over that vinyl tab we just stitched down, and then move my tape to cover it. So I just wanted to hold it in place just like that. So now before we attach the felt, let's stick on our tabs for our pen loop. This is completely optional. You do not have to do it. It's not part of the pattern. So I'm going to put my tabs on the same side as the back of my notebook. And the back of my notebook has this design here. So what I do is I take my little elastic and I fold it in half. I'm going to grab some of that really sticky tape and I'm going to tape it over the bottom raw edges of my elastic just like that. But I'm not going to have the tape extend more than halfway up the elastic. See, so this should be about a 1 inch size. The tape comes up to about 1/2 inch. And then when I tape this down, the loop is going to overhang the edge, so right by my frame, by 1/2 inch. So when I tape this down, the tape is not going past my stitching, and my loop is just going past the stitching about 1/2 inch. You want to keep the loop pretty tight. You don't want it to be too loose. With these pen loops, it's better if they're too tight rather than too loose. If they're too loose, the pens just fall right out of them. So if you get a little concerned about which way you should be pushing it, push it more towards the center so that just a small amount overhangs the edge. There we go. Now we're going to take our felt and I'm just going to spray my glue on the back of the felt. And then with glue side down, I'm going to just lay this over the back of my cutaway so it covers both of my notebook holders completely. So I'm going to flip it over and then I'll push it really firmly from the front so that way I don't stretch out my cutaway or cause any problems. If you're using tearaway during that step, it's really easy to rip all of the tearaway because of all the satin stitching. That's why I like to use the cutaway for this. Okay, now this is going to go back in the machine, and it's going to stitch down the outline of the entire notebook holder, as well as the little binding here around the middle, and it's going to hold down the felt. So make sure when you're inserting this felt doesn't get pushed out of the way. Now we have the backing attached. That's looking adorable. These are so cute. Okay, so now let's flip it over and attach our pockets. So you can attach these pockets one by one, like that. Or I think you could actually just cut 2 longer strips and attach it like that, which I think is going to be how we're going to do it if we do this in the shop. I think this is going to be the easier option. Just get a nice long cut and do it on one end and do it on the other end, and then I think it'll hold it all in place, and you'll have less of a risk of these kind of detaching and then falling off while they're in stitching, which happens a lot, right? So as this is stitching at the machine, this is underneath, we can't see it. Sometimes it's rubbing against the bed or the arm of your embroidery machine, and then this, you know, these bigger ones will just kind of fold out of the way and you don't even know it didn't work. So I definitely think these long strips, if you're making these 2 at a time on a frame like I am, I think this is the way to go. I'm just gonna add my tape, and I do not mind this tape getting in the stitches at all. It comes out very easily. And also remember, the stickier vinyl you're using on the back here, the more chance you're gonna have that this sticks to the arm or the bed of your embroidery machine and causes problems. All right, you can see I've taped it quite a bit. I'm gonna flip it over and push down on that tape really well, because I don't want the tape kind of loosening up and then rolling and sticking to the arm, and then everything just falls apart. It happens a lot. All right, I meant to check on my pen tabs. I hope they're doing okay. All right, now we're going to take this back to the embroidery machine. This is the final step. It's just going to stitch down the outline again, and it's going to hold those pockets in place. There we go, all done, and it looks like we got lucky. Nothing happened. That's fantastic. Fantastic. So I am just going to quickly get the tape out of the stitches. One thing we have noticed is the longer masking tape stays in stitches, the harder it can be to get out. So we don't waste time with that step. As soon as we're done with the project, especially if it's something that we're going to put in the shop, or if it's something we're going to gift to someone, we take the tape out right away. So what we'll typically do for our shop is make a whole bunch of these sheets of vinyl, just like, you know, just this, and we'll stack them up, and then we'll cut them all down at a later date. But we will always remove the tape right away. We don't stack them up with the tape on them. Now I'm going to grab my fabric scissors, and I'm going to cut these down. So if you watched my previous video going over these, you may have noticed that I cut off the pen tab. We're not going to do that this time. So we're going to just cut around the edge on the side where the pen tab is, and then once I get towards the center, I just veer off and cut off the side, and then I'll start back up once I'm past that pen loop, and then I'll just continue cutting around my notebook holder. I'm just cutting 1/8 of an inch, maybe just under 1/8 of an inch away from those outer stitches. Nice and slow. We don't have any crazy curves here or anything. You might have seen in some of the hand sanitizer videos we've done, we have a lot of intricate curves we have to cut around. This is just straight lines and small curves, so you should be good. But cutting this just takes practice as well. The more you do it, the cleaner it'll look. There we go. So now for that little pen hoop there, I'm going to push down the pocket vinyl, the felt, and the little pen loop. So I only have my top vinyl and my cutaway, and I'm going to cut the same distance away from the stitching as I did when I was cutting around the rest of the notebook holder. There we go, trying to keep it all nice and flush. That looks pretty good. So now I'm gonna lift it back up, and I'm going to take my pen loop and fold it down towards the front, out of the way. And now I'm cutting the felt and the pocket vinyl down to meet where I just cut the front. There you go. And then if you need to trim up the side or anything, you can. And there you go. Isn't that adorable? So I'm gonna cut down this one as well because again, we're timing this. We're trying to see how long it takes us to make 2 of these. All right, here we go. I have both of them made. They look adorable. I have my notebooks already inside of them. I will say not all these notebooks are created equal. Although a lot of these small notebooks will say they are the same size, some do fit better than others. So I've seen in the Facebook group, a lot of people said that the notebooks that you could get from like the dollar store, those small ones that are 4.5 by 3.25, those fit better. I got these ones off of Amazon. They are a little tight in these notebook holders, but I found that the other notebooks with the rounded edges do fit a little bit better. So you might have to kind of play around with your notebooks to make sure you get the perfect one that fits in here. However, even this one, which is a pretty snug fit, you can kind of stretch it out a little bit, smush it around. And it depends a lot on the material you're using. The thicker the vinyl you're using, the more space it's gonna take up. And I really believe that the felt is a big deal here. The felt that I like to use is more of a thinner felt that has a crisper feel. I really suggest using that with these. I think that it feels firmer, it feels more professional. When I used the fluffier craft felt from the hobby store, it's a little bit more mushy and it takes up more space. So here it is, and you can make this the front if you want, just depending on the direction of your fabric, right? If you want this to be the front, that can be the front, or this can be the front. I have a little pen here. I'm just gonna insert that into my pen loop. And this pen loop is on the tighter side, which is perfect. So this is what it ends up looking like. You see, it's a little bit shorter than the pen, but it actually works really well with just a standard size pen. If we look on the back, you see we have that beautiful little accent. So you can have a lot of fun with this right here. You could use all kinds of fun fabric and vinyl. So to make 2 of these took about 1.5 to 2 hours. It just depends on how much I'm talking. But I would say it's about 1.5 to 2 hours to make 2 of these. I have seen these priced anywhere between $5 and $35. Not even joking. So it's hard to say, are these a good selling item? Now that just depends on your market. It depends on your customers. I wouldn't sell these probably for less than $15. I would probably push more towards $20 or more, especially depending on the type of material you're using and the enhancements that you make to it. If you already have a business where you're making handmade goods, this could be a scrap project. So I know for us, we have a huge bin of bigger cuts of scraps from other projects of vinyl and felt and, different fabrics. So these can be made entirely from scraps, which is fantastic, but it does take time. So while the cost of goods to make it can be low since it's scraps, the amount of time it takes can be high, and it's taking you away from making other items that might be more profitable. So I think that this will be a good selling item for our shop because it is something that we can use our scraps for. It is something that we can do kind of on the weekends and the free time, and they're fun to make. And that's really the biggest thing. If you don't enjoy what you're making, don't sell it. If you don't like making it, don't sell it. It's not worth it. A lot of these items that we make, we really, really love making. We love making all of our notebook holders. We love making the snack bags. We love making the hats. We love making all these things. So the time it takes to make them makes it all worth it for us. We love making it, and we love seeing when everybody gets it and they share it and how happy it makes them. We love all of that. But if we didn't enjoy making these, I would not have them in my shop. So I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. I hope this just motivated you to make a bunch of these if you haven't already. I mean, everybody has made these. I feel like I'm totally late to the party. Everybody's already been making them and selling them. Everyone's honestly probably sick of them. So we'll see. But if you haven't already made them and you have an embroidery machine, give them a shot. Let me know if you make them. Let me know what kind of embroidery machine you're using. Are you using a multi-needle or a single needle? Are you using big hoops or little hoops? I want to know. Tell me all about it. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.